All right, welcome back, where we finish off the Magic Casters in Mordheim, City of the Damned, where this side will be looking at the evil among us. What I learned was called the Arcane Casters. Zinch Curses. I was thinking about the game. I've played the Sisters, going on about the Sisters. I try to do diversity. But, hello again. My bread and butter, if you don't know, is the cult. This is my team. This is my jam. My 1A to this 1 or 1B to this 1A. I don't know. My backup warband would actually be the Skaven. I mean, how does a guy with the name Kitten Paw not love the warband full of paws? I've been slumming it on the side of Devotion. They're out of stocks. I'm sorry. I hope it's a good one. So here we are back on my much more comfortable side of evil and chaos, and we have should be fun. So we're gonna start with probably. I just love this guy, the Magister. I remember when I first started the game, I'm like, why is this guy so terrible? I just thought he was the worst. Little did I know. I was looking at this Weapons of Destruction spell and being like, I don't really get it. It's not that good. Turns out it's like the best spell in the game. Actually, I didn't realize it. I've always assumed it was 10 and 20. I didn't realize the mod made it 10 and 15. Didn't realize it was. I was talking about Curse of Rust being the second best skill in the game. It might actually be the best skill in the game looking at that. I didn't realize the nerf. So, Curse of Rust, if I was making, we've been doing this tier making thing, I would call it literally the best skill in the game. Spell, whatever, would be Curse of Rust. It's 2 OP. It reduces armor by 15% and 20%. You can stack them with 2 Warlocks. You can have 52 meter range casting. It is by far the best skill in the game. So I guess number 2 now would be Weapons of Destruction. It is the second best spell in the game. Yes, that was the caveat. Curse of Rust has to bypass. Typically not a problem for the Warlock. So this is a buff, so it's a little weaker, I guess. It increases the damage only by 10%. It's a bit changed from vanilla. It's nerfed from vanilla, I would say. Well, in vanilla it's 20 and 40, isn't it? Something. But then the damage is nerfed as well. So it's okay that it's nerfed. It's still very good. I actually thought it was 15 and 20 or even 10 and 20. It's been a while since I looked at it. I guess it's 10 and 15. The fact that only one Magister can be on the battlefield at the time, though, reduces its effectiveness versus Curse of Rust. So a Warlock can remove 35% of armor. Cult can only remove 15. I mean, the mercs are fucking crazy. It's so crazy. And it's 2 OP, and it's ranged. Armor break needs 15 accuracy. It's 3 OP. You have to be engaged. So here's the destruction version. The third one we'll be looking at is Sorcerer's Curse, but the thing about Weapons of Destruction as well, you can only have one of them, so it's going to be really hard to rank them in that regard. This is the first unit where this is the case. It's kind of funny thinking about it. Everyone else you can double up on except the Magister. Because the Matriarch can be, they have the same spell book. You can have 2 Warrior Priests, you can have 2 Warlocks, 2 Wolf Priests, 2 Eshin, 2 Necromancers, 2 Dreamweavers. You can only have 1 Magister. Which is kind of a shame. I guess maybe his spells need to be really good then. Let's see if it shakes out that way. So basic. That's a Doomweaver. I would say is average. It starts out fine, and you start with it, and you can use it. 10% is 10%. A lot of units won't have that right out the gate. They'll be in white cloth, so it reduces some of its effectiveness. And I think you immediately kind of want to get off of it. I kind of feel bad that you nerfed this. I don't know why it's not 10 and 20. I think that was 100% unnecessary. Um, I still think this is God tier. I mean, armor bypass is that important to me. I feel like it's the single most important thing in the game. So you master it and you spread it around. The other thing not often noticed or realized with this spell is it applies to ranged. So you can apply this to your mutant archer and turn his bow into basically a crossbow. A little less, a little weaker than a crossbow. Um, so it really helps them. It's like a crossbow with ranged hit chance. Pick up the stone, you get crit chance. So that's something that's unique about weapons of destruction. So he's saying he buffed armbands, so he felt like you don't need more armor bypass. I don't know. I still think you leave the principle of armor bypass. Since you can only have one Magister, I don't think you can. I mean, Curse of Rust does 35%. It does 20% more if you stack it. It literally does 5% more. Same with Sorcerer's Curse. I think you've handicapped them a little too much. It's still great. It's still godly. I have it up there. It's hard not to because it's a buff you can spam around to give significant damage. Since armor is the last thing calculated in a damage calculation, that's why that's not like the Sigmar's Might 10%. It's a 15% to your total output. So it's usually a much more significant number. And the fact that you can put it on, again, ranged, I think helps it a lot. But I would like to see it put back to where it belongs at 10 and 20. Same with the damage. I think the damage... Oh, this does say damage 15. This should just be 20, and it's fine. There's no reason to nerf it. But it's nerfed. Boon of Chaos randomly selects one of the 3 primary attributes. So if you pick up Wordstone, you notice there's debuffs that do this. I don't think there's a buff version, is there? And it increases it by 2 or by 4. This one... It's a love-hate thing with this. It's a lot harder to spam this out with the reduced curse reduction in the mod. So on your second one, you already are taking a 5% curse chance, I want to say. It could be 10%. I can't remember. It might be. I think it's 5%. So it's a little harder to spam it around. But if you click and hit in the right category, gaining 12 stat points is really good. I think this is something you do early on if you're making this build. You take Weapons of Destruction and Boon of Chaos, and you just pick your pet, your little puppet, little man's best friend, the Chaos Spawn, or the Possessed, and you just spam Chaos Boons of Chaos on it and try to max everything. Thing is, with the Chaos Spawn, he's pretty high on most categories anyway. The Possessed, it can help, but it can't help that much, you know. But it's a way to increase damage and initiative and dodge and just a lot of things. It's just random, so you don't know what you're going to get. But it's something that's great to use before engagement begins, and I would encourage people to try it. The caveat being, if you increase your initiative and you jump somebody, this thing falls off, and it's really hard to reapply it correctly. You could suddenly get 2 turned, which could be pretty bad. And again, since there's only one Magister, I think that's really bad to awful. I don't think you use that one. You can't stack it. So why would you just do 2 skill points? This isn't one of those skills where you just take the basic. You either take the mastery or not. And I would say it's actually a tier lower. Like, you don't know what you're going to get, and it can come back to bite you, so it's not perfect. And I feel like the top spot's reserved for perfect spells or skills. So I think I would put it 1 notch lower. But it's a great strategy, and if you guys are trying the game, I highly recommend you try some Boons of Chaos. Just got to watch out you don't blow up your own mind, because you're going to be wanting to cast this and this and that, and next thing you know, you've exploded. So on the flip side, you have Curse of Chaos, which is the exact same thing except a curse. Now, we're talking here a shop in the chat, and he's talked about Curse of Rust, and he's talked about Weapons of Destruction. Boon of Chaos is a buff, yet it does the exact same strength as the curse. So we're already contradicting our own rules here. So I don't understand this. Since curses are harder to apply, why isn't this higher? So, so the response is it's an area spell. So okay, that works for me. It is true you can hit multiple units. Again, it's random even within the units, I want to say. Say you hit 2 units with this spell, one might hit the physical and another in the mentals. You have to bypass magic resistance. Again, it wants to be good. You would never take the basic. We just, since you can't stack, it's just awful. And it's a lot harder to use because you can't. I guess the AI, you can kind of abuse them. It's a lot harder in PvP. I tried it and I was just always disappointed. Um, you don't know what stats you're hitting. Um, if you hit the right ones, it can be extremely beneficial. If you don't, you're not really doing anything. And I wish I would have done something else. Is kind of where you end up with that. So he feels they should be starting spells. I think they're fine where they are. It's the yin yang. There's something to be said for taking them. They work. I think there's just many other better spells in his spell book is really what these suffer from. And that's it. But as 2 OP spells you can spam out, I think they're perfectly fine. And you can get a lot of mileage out of them. The randomness is what kind of hurts them. But there's nothing else like we were talking about blessing of athleticism for sisters, right? And I felt like that was shit. If you slap a boon of chaos on them, you get what, 8% dodge? If it hits your marshals, you're getting 8% dodge bypass. If it's the strength, you get 8% parry bypass. You're like halfway there, plus the other benefits. You know what I mean? Plus you're gaining 4% crit chance. Like, just this boon of chaos is superior. Again, it's single target, but I'm not going to put this on henchmen. Just like Blessing of Athleticism won't do shit for henchmen, you know? It's like, it's really interesting to compare it to similar spells that want to do similar things. And I feel like Boon of Chaos can really get a lot of benefit. And then the Curse of Chaos, you're looking to get 4%. So if you get this to go and that could go, you can get an 8% crit chance if this both hits physicals. You've gained I'm sorry, this would hit martial for accuracy, and that would be toughness. So you've got an 8-point swing on critical hit chance. You know what I mean? You can start to see where the craziness comes into play. And a build, I would, again, since we're talking about it, I think it's fun to talk about. You would want to take the Idol of Pestilence with this guy. Because it can reduce them all by 4. And this is where the synergy starts to come into play. And I've tried it. The randomness is random. It's chaotic. It's the cult. But it can be really awesome when it hits. So, and I recommend people try it. It's a fun build. Acid Breath. So this strips armor by 5% for basic and barely does any damage. Like 10, we'll say. And it does a 10 poison debuff. And then it doubles to like 15. I'm sorry. Doesn't double it. Goes up by a third. You get 15 average damage. And then armor absorption 10, and it's stackable. So the whole point of this is another tool to strip armor. Since Weapons of Destruction was nerfed a little, you can do this as like a Curse of Rust that does damage but costs 1 more OP, and it doesn't strip as much armor. So it's like a worse Curse of Rust, but also you can hit more units because it's AoE. And again, I think we're going to see a lot of this. Like, that's bad. I actually think it's godly. To be quite honest, I think it's slept on as a spell. You can easily, we've talked about 3 OP spells. You can get down to 2 OP, quick casting and things like that, or just doing a couple of them. You could strip off a lot of armor. And then the damage isn't nothing. And they take the poison, I guess, only for 1 turn. You'd have to, I don't think it stacks. I feel like it should, but Would the poison stack for 3 turns? I feel like it should. And if not, if it does, I mean, that's also some more significant damage. If you're doing 15 for 3 turns, that's like 45 more damage, plus, I mean, you're trying to focus fire this unit down anyway, but I think the poisons stick around. Either way, it's a good tool for stripping armor, which I've talked about being very powerful. Yeah, I think it is. I think they do proc a poison every time. Now, the cult has some tough story missions, for example. So once you go out in there and have to fight that ogre, you really wish you had both acid breath and weapons of destruction. It's a really good tool for just dealing with armor, which again I think is the most important thing you can deal with in this game. And I think I would really recommend people try like a caster magister. You can really get a good cone out of them. You can get them up to, you put a staff on, you're at what, 14 meters. Then you do reach, you're at 24 meters. You can put, or I'm sorry, like expert casting, and then reach, you can get a 30-meter long cone. So you can like clip a lot of people. So we were talking about one target. If you just hit 2, you're at Curse of Rust, right? And you can spam it around. I think it's just a really godly spell. He's clicking the wrong. So right off the bat, his 2 armor stripping spells are right up there, as you would expect, given what I think is important. It's a shame you can only have one of these guys. I believe in MMM, the monsters in Mordheim and Magic, you can get more than one Magister. So if people want to experience double Magisters, I think it could be fun. Plus, I think you can get the chick, the caster girl, the impressive or dramatis as a unlocked unit. Then you have Vision of Torment. This one's very confusing as well. It confuses veterans. It either stuns all targets who fail a stun resistance test, or it inflicts a debuff on all targets that reduces melee and range resistance along with their dodge and parry by 10%. It's really awkward to figure out what the fuck it just rolled when you do this spell. So either there's an AoE stun check, or you've stripped the other things, but it doesn't stack. And then you'll I feel like it gets locked into one or the other. So it's awkward to say you didn't get the stun check, and your whole point is you want to stun people. You roll it again, you might just literally have done nothing because you've already done this penalty, and you can't stack it. So Vision of Torment is just awkward to use. The debuffs are significant. Like we've talked about having debuffs, and I was talking about Dread of Armar. This is like better than Dread of Armar, except it doesn't break your stance. It's kind of like Dread of Armar. Both are 3 OP, I want to say. Except that breaks your stance. This one can stun you, which definitely breaks your stance. And we know where we rank that. I think, again, this is kind of godly, what it can do. And then this one's not as bad. If you only have 2 OP, I found I've taken this to try to just get the stun check. But again, I never know. You never know if you're getting it, which is... He's saying it should stack, which would be crazy strong. I don't know. That seems a lot. I just, you looked at the coding. I don't quite get how it works. I remember Dig had one previous tournament, and he was trying to use it, and I'm watching the stream. I'm like, what? I don't even know what he just rolled. And then he did, and it's like, what is rolling? I don't even know what's rolling. I feel like the stun check is actually a magic check, but it's not. It's very confusing. I haven't used it as much as I should because of that reason. You just go with what works. But there's a build here with this Vision of Torment and Ward of Pain around the caster. And the Magister, we talked about the Warlock, you can make a melee resist build. You can easily do that with the Magister. And that's when you're switching from those 2 OP buffing kind of build. And then you have the 2 OP armor stripping kind of build, or just armor stripping, I guess that's 3. And you can go to this melee resistance, debuff, get in the fucking battle kind of build. And there's a lot of fun ways to build the Magister in that way, which is why it's a shame you can only get one. But he's such a diverse, viable, fun unit. Um, so that brings us to Word of Pain. This is the Soulfire except good. 8 more damage on average. That's a big starting point. Now you can only have one. You can have 2 wolf or warrior priests soul firing, I guess. So, but if you build one and you get them in there in the ruckus, spamming out Word of Pain, you will do significant damage. I saw someone with this build. They were doing like 70 damage a pop, which was pretty impressive. If you do build that caster version, though, you will die. Because you need to take all the kind of caster rebuffs. You'll have very low survivability. But you can get in there and you'll have to try to 2-turn someone and get out of there and get protected. But if you don't go all like magic damage skills, what I'm talking about is like channeling, pain, which increase damage. You'll see them in here. The runes, the staff versus shield. You can still get some good damage buffs just with channeling and pain. Whilst trying to mix in survivability and get in there and just start spamming this on groups, it could be very dangerous over time if it's a melee resist Magister that can spam these out. So it's funny, I kind of didn't like that Soulfire build, but it wasn't the best version of this, and I've said as much on the forums. Why do that when you can have the better version? I think it's elite. It's the best AoE around self spell in the game. And it does good damage. And there's builds for this guy to do that. You could say that again with the Wolf Priest, or Warrior Priest, but I said there kind of wasn't, right? What is the difference? Well, the Warrior Priest, I was talking about this. He had Soulfire, and then he has Soulfire, and then Soulfire, and it looks like I'll Soulfire again. Okay, the Magister, he has Word of Pain. Oh, now I'm going to Vision of Torment your ass and stun you and break your stances. Or I'm just going to Acid Breath in your face, too, to strip your armor. And so you can see the difference. Like, there's significant things he can do along with Word of Pain that makes him want to get into a group of fighters. So the fact that it does more damage, and then there's viable builds for him to do this, especially a melee resistance build, I think he's better than the Warrior Priest at that, who can rely on armor, but ironically, in a sense, so can the Magister. He can wear heavy armor. But casting's an issue, obviously. But I digress. I think he could do more group things that want him to get into a group. So that reason, I feel like it further increases the viability of that spell for him. And this is probably just awful. You're not taking the basic. It's the same. We've talked about it. We'll continue to talk about it. He's going to change the damage, I believe. You could see maybe I have 2 leftover spell points. I'd rather take this Vision of Torment, but you could do Word of Pain instead, I guess. And you get to the 4 OP spells. Chains of Chaos. This is the bread and butter of vanilla. You took Chains of Chaos and you took Weapons of Destruction. This was the Magister. It needed reduced, but it's still very strong. It increases the cost of attack, counterattack, charge, shoot, aim, basically any offensive things by 1 for 2 turns. Also prevents offensive skills, and it increases to 3 turns. And you have more range. So you can no longer use Jaw Strikes. I wonder if Daredevil, I don't know if it's actives or like passive actives. If that's a statement. But I know it blocks attacks, special attacks. I don't know if it's also those other things. I don't think it's considered an sense of skill, so it doesn't block it. I don't think it blocks order either. But basically, if you see a demon and you don't want to get hit 5 times, you would much rather get hit 3 times. You cast Chains of Chaos on it. And then you also do a Touch of Palsy. Actually, you'd have to do 2, right? Because you could still do 3 attacks. You'd be at 9. But You see impressive, anything that you don't want to get hit by a lot, you put Chains of Chaos on it, and it's extremely effective at just nerfing your incoming damage. I think Mastery is worth it because it lasts for 3 turns and adds another turn. And it blocks the offensive. That's enough to make it matter. But Basic, I think, is good. This is another one. I think it's slightly above Vision of Torment, especially if you're like a ranged back row kind of Magister. You're like, boy, I got 2 spell points to use. Why don't I just take Chains of Chaos? And I think that's very much a spell you just toss in there. I would almost say it's great. Because it is, in a sense, a narrow use window. If you're doing PvE or is there an impressive or is there a demon? Oh, there is. I can use it this battle. Otherwise, you might not use it for a battle. And that's okay if it's only 2 spell points. And I think you run into that a lot with the Magister because he masters Weapons of Destruction. So he inherently has an awkward number of spell points left. We can look at it by mastering some of these. So you have it. I've already ran out. I would get rid of the Veil of Corruption, and then you use a spell book. We can just finish the job. And then this is at Mastery. So you have a Mastery, 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 and then you're just sitting on 2 spell points. That happens a lot for the Magister. And I find I'm either taking Chains of Chaos or I'm taking the Veil of Corruption. A lot of units you don't master the starting spell, and then so the math isn't quite there that way. But in this case, this is exactly what you do with him. So I think it finds even more use for him. Okay, let me make that basic. And then you get to Veil of Corruption. And it reduces range resistance by 15%, and Gathering Wordstone deals damage. And even the area inflicts a melee resistance debuff. I played someone so long ago I don't remember. He used this on me. I think it was during Battle of Behemoth. And I remember it being really fucking annoying because it's very effective. It's the opposite of the Eshin spell, which we will see in a little bit, I guess next. Enshrouding Mist, except not as strong. If you're in the mist, it reduces range resistance, and then you have a melee resistance penalty. If you're in the mist, it increases range, like it reduces range. You're easier to shoot, not harder to shoot. But then if you leave, you also then have that melee resistance penalty. So it's a bit different, but it's also like very good. The one caveat is the cult doesn't have that many ranged units, but they can make good ranged units. And then the point is probably that melee resistance debuff. So if you're playing somebody, the AI, PvP, there's a unit across the map. This is an area effect, so you just throw it down and they can't resist it. So they have to walk through that. And if you can shoot him in it, great. So say you see the guy, your Magister axe, puts the cloud down, then you can shoot him a bit. Great. Then he walks out of it towards you to engage you. It now has 30% melee resistance debuff. That is a lot. So that is godly. And then this one's probably just falls right there with Veil of Corruption. And hey, I have 2 OP left, what I just talked about. Why not take a melee resistance penalty on the AI? So there's 3 of those spells I think you put there. I think Chains probably wins, but you could also do this Veil, and you can also do the other Veil. Are they all just called Veil? Vision. Vision of Torment, Veil of Corruption. Vision, Veil, Chains. They all sound the same. There are 3 words with of in between. Holy shit. Word of Pain, Chains of Chaos, Veil of Corruption, Weapons of Destruction. Boon of Chaos, Curse of Chaos. This guy's right there with the Wolf Priest. I never know what the fuck it's called. They all sound the same. So there you go. I think the Magister's a great unit. He suffers from not being able to take 2 of them. This has been the best we've made so far, honestly. This is better than the Warlock, maybe. The Warlock had maybe more godly, but the Fireball was down here. Like, every single spell in the Magister's spellbook is good. I don't. You can almost argue Boon of Chaos or Curse of Chaos could be a little higher. It's very effective. It's the RNG behind it. So okay, it follows. Like you can only have one of them, and I think his stuff is pretty fucking good, considering you can have one of them. Whew. Eshin. Let's see how many ofs are in this one. A couple. The Eshin. Okay, so you guys, I've been on the forum. Maybe you're new to meeting me. I played the Skaven a couple tournaments back, and boy, did I shit all over the Eshin. I was really disappointed with where the Skaven were, where the Eshin was, and Paranoia took the feedback, and I think he's in a good place again. Um, First one was Wither. I remember the debuff was lower at the time, and then it just wasn't working. I think it was like two for the max master. It's been a while, but Wither was just a shell of itself. It's now back to what I would say again is a very good starting spell. We talked about that with Order. I don't think I talked about this here yet, but again, Weapons of Destruction, great starting spell. I think Weather is just a good one. It's okay. It's just fine. Rotten Touch, great starting spell. Boon of Ruin, we talked about this. Not great. It was there with Blessing of the sister spells, basically. So, but Wither, I think it's perfectly fine. Reduce strength, agility, and toughness by 3, and reduce your movement by 1. The Skaven are a very fast warband. They're happy to have you not be able to reach them. They're happy to be able to hit and run. They also like to do a lot of dodge bypass. So you losing 15% of your dodge is great. You losing 3% crit resistance, that's great. That's what the toughness does. Um, I think it's a perfectly fine, viable starting spell. You can throw it out there. You'll use it right out the gate, I think. Especially early PvP. We talk about like, how am I going to use this, or am I just going to do something else? I think you do. Like units are all going to have 4 to 6 meters movement range, maybe 7 with the vampires or something. And you are Skaven, and everyone has 8. So if you can reduce the AI reaching you or things reaching you, you're already getting good benefit out of it. And then so the Mastery Wither, I think people have slept on this. It was a staple of vanilla, it really was. You'd Wither because you want to reduce 20% dodge resistance for landing your Daredevils, and that's what it still is now. And I think it's very good for Daredevil builds. It's only 2 OP, and you can throw it around. Is it godly? I don't think it reaches that level because ultimately you're not doing that much significant. Like reducing the dodge by 20 is great. A lot of times they can reach that dodge threshold though. Reducing the strength or crit resistance also good. Like we talked about strength of Sigmar, Sigmar's Might increases your crit chance by 2% relative to other warbands, right? And then I mentioned Skaven. They can do Art of Silent Death and gain 20% crit chance. If you stack Wither, you've gained 7% crit chance. No one's going to say stacking Withers is good as Sigmar's Might. Now, Sigmar's Might stack will give you 15, right? But you're gaining 7% crit chance. You don't think about it, but that's like significant crit chance gained as well. There's other tools that other warbands have to increase their crit chance. And so Wither will be one of them. And then you can put this little rat. I'm sorry, you can't. I'm thinking of the Poison Wind Globadier or Doomweaver. But you can bring the Doomweaver in with Idol of Pestilence, and you can further reduce some stats using the Idol of Pestilence and whatnot. So the Wither stacks with the Pestilence Idol. So there's other tools available to them. If you put Wither in with the Cult and the Curse of Chaos, that'd be just craziness, actually. That's what I was thinking of. So I don't think it's like totally insane. The 2 meters movement is good. I think it's just a notch below. I think you'll find some good use with it, especially with the low range of shurikens. Being able to shoot somebody and run away, and them only having 4 meters movement. It's very helpful. So it's generally easy to master, I think. Not literally, but like it's easy for you to consider mastering it at 9 intelligence and taking it right off the bat. Blessed with Filth was another kind of staple of vanilla. Um, the damage has been all over the place now. I think people are kind of happy. I can tell you it was fucking anemic when I used them. Then it was supposedly over buffed, but now maybe it's in the middle somewhere. Um, it's a way to get extra damage for the Skaven. It's basically what it is. And it's nice. The sisters dream of a tool like this. They have no way of gaining extra damage. Blessed with Filth is a way to kind of deal with armor. It's a guaranteed extra damage. Armor doesn't stop poison. So if you take Mastery Blessed with Filth, you have 12. We'll just say 12. We'll round. 12 damage per hit. That's significant. We saw Strength or Might of Sigmar, Blessing of Sigmar does 10% damage. That's 3 damage. And then armor will reduce that further. I mean, 12 is much larger number than less than 3. So you can see where Blessed with Filth is a very nice tool for them. And it keeps your opponents very honest. And it's something you spam before battles start. And we love those. We love those spells. So I think Blessed with Filth, Godly, is just great. Having that threat on the battlefield is significant in my opinion. And I would say the basic is probably slightly above average. These numbers are better. Like, that's not far off from that. So what you're looking at is you can stack them. But again, if you just have 2 spell points, keeping your opponent honest and having that little bit of 8 extra damage, 8 to 9 extra damage, it does matter. It adds up. So I think it's a good spell. It's a great level 2 buff. So it's worth spreading around the map. And then you get to the Musk of Courage. This is what Hearts of Griffin wanted to be, except it works. Except I don't know how much the Skaven need this. Hearts of Griffin was what, 3 OP? This is only 2. I think this is... Okay, that's for vanilla, or the basic. So it is 3 turns. For what it does, it's effective. It's a group around the caster spell, so I don't think it's that good. And I think that one's just awful to really bad. Because we've talked about All Alone. You'd almost say horrendous. It's probably similar to where I put the other one. You're saying Musk is getting a rework. At least this one works. Like, it blocks all of the psychology. It falls into the problem of I have to group up and put it on my rats. By the time I do that and get to where I need to go, is it even still active? You know? And then I think a lot of the rats just want Serenity tests, to be quite honest. Blocking Serenity tests sometimes is just bad for your team. Like the Eshin Sorcerer wants a Serenity test, and he's one of your better melee resistance units. And he can take Serenity tests. So I just think its use window is very narrow. Gaze of the Horned Rat. This is reworked. I'm pretty sure it was 4 in vanilla. I'm not sure what the maximums were. It's a sign that no one rarely used it. Let's just put it at that, because it only lasted a turn. Now that it lasts 3 turns, and it takes 2 and 2, you can stack them for 3 and 3. You can stack this with the poisons, the crippling shots, the hamstrings. You've got yourself a pretty effective spell at doing what you want to do with the rats. Again, it's probably slightly above average. If you have 2 spell points there, there's nothing wrong with taking 1 offensive point away. And then if you're doing the stacking, it can stack. Taking away 2 offensive points. Okay, let me think. So I've said you really kind of want to take away 3. So I'm not sure I'm as in love with this. So I might move that down. I thought it was strategy points and offensive points. The fact that it only does offensive points, I think it reduces its effectiveness. So if you take away 2 offensive points for an impressive at 9 OP, every single impressive ever made has at least basic ad rush. You're still going to get hit 4 times. You're not going to get hit 5 times anymore, but the effectiveness of it is just limited. If you take away 1 OP from a demon, they have 10 OP. It still has 9. It's only going to attack 4 times. If you take 2 away, it's at 8. It's only going to attack 4 times. So I start to think the mastery is just not that good. Almost the basics better in a sense, because if you just have 2 spell points. Why not just take the basic? I guess the turn duration. Oh, it's hard to say. I mean, it does work with what they're trying to do with OP reduction. So in that sense, it works within the warband. Yeah, he's saying it used to be 2 and 3. I just wonder if it can't be 1 and 3. Or if it's 2 OP and 1 SP for mastery. I just think that 2's not getting it done. Or if it's 1 OP, 1 SP, or 2 OP, 2 SP. You should leave the door open for people that want to remove SP instead of OP. It's definitely one of the weaker spells in his kit, so. I don't know how that snuck in there. I guess I was looking at it earlier, right? Then you get Sorcerer's Curse. The shitty Curse of Rust. So Sorcerer's Curse, this was, again, bread and butter of vanilla. You take this in Wither, and you just daredevil kill units. You take off 40% of the armor. So in the mod now, it's 15 and 20 like Curse of Rust, and it still removes dodge and parry by 20%. I think the 1 OP for 20% dodge and parry is worse. It's not as good as Curse of Rust being a 2 OP spell. It's harder to spam this around the map. That said, I just said it's the best skill in the game. Weapons of Destruction, probably the second best. This is probably the third best spell in the game. Skill, spell, active, whatever the fuck term you want to use. It's the third best thing you could take in the game. Because it's better than Armor Break. It costs the same as Armor Break, does the same as Armor Break, except you can do it safely from a distance. Now, if you're going to say you have to bypass magic resistance, okay, well, for Armor Break, you have to bypass melee resistance, and you also have to bypass a stance usually, and then your ass is in battle. So it's Armor Break, but ranged. So I think that's a very good place to be. And it allows your whole team to do 20% more damage to the enemy. The basic, doing 15% means it's very viable, just like Curse of Rust. It's going to be right there, kind of, you know, if you look at it, you're like, well, you had Curse of Rust ranked exactly the same. And I did. But it was so good, there isn't a tier above this. So, like, I think Sorcerer's Curse is going to be right there with it, even though it's a slightly worse version. And I think the basic's going to be right there with the basic Curse of Rust, because it's, you know, it's still very effective at what it does. You could say, well, okay, shouldn't it just be great if the Mastery Curse or basic Curse of Rust was there? Maybe I should have moved basic Curse of Rust up. I don't know. You know, maybe I'm splitting hairs. Maybe I could have. I would say if we had these all on the line like Mork does, this is below basic Curse of Rust is how you can look at it. I still think it's on that tier. So people have posted, again, I talk about how Sisters can't bypass any fucking armor whatsoever. The Skaven have this Sorcerer's Curse spell that no other warbands have. So we've looked at 3. The Mercs can bypass, the Skaven can bypass, and the Cult can bypass. The Undead have a skill, Find the Breach, and then the Witch Hunters and Sisters have absolutely no way to bypass armor. So then you also look at the Skaven, you know, what weapons do they have? They do have Fighting Claws. These exist. They don't have any single-handed armor bypass weapon, and that's like the flip side. But the Skaven have amazing stance bypass. We've talked about stances and how the Sister have 0 parry bypass. This is another way to get past dodge and parry. If you just even ignore the armor, like their dodge and parry bypass with the Black Hunger, Sorcerer's Curse, their stat distribution, Wither, all these different things means that if both warbands, you know, are attacking the same unit, the Skaven are going to get more hits in. Even if it's doing, let's say nobody has any armor bypass, you're using a flail, they're only using a spear, your actually landed hits will do more damage than any of the 12% armor bypass a flail gave you. Um, and that's how people should be looking at it. And that's what also these spells enable. Then you get to Warp Lightning, which I believe was moved from 4 to 3. It was a joke in vanilla. Vanilla doesn't have all the magic boosting damage things that this game has, so the mods boost the damage, and it went from 4 OP to 3 OP, so you can actually do 3 of them. We've talked about how common the 3 OP spells are. Looking at it, I didn't realize it was 20 meters. That's pretty significant. So that's pretty much the same as a comet. So I think it needs to be considered in the same breath as comets. And I believe comets were, was it 24 to something? I want to say comets were around 20. Ooh, I don't remember. 24 average damage. It was very similar to this. So the average damage, we looked at it at the time. The average damage is very similar. Where this is an AoE spell. Well, we left this tab open on purpose for doing this kind of comparison. It must be a little higher because it's a single target. It's not that much. It's 10, so that's 29 versus 23. So it's got 6 more damage. But again, this is AoE. So just hitting 2, you're way better than the Comet. And then you also have the debuff. Or buff. Or buff. And this has been talked about on the forums a lot. Like, I hate that you can buff, but if you do debuff, it's very good. Like, you can strip another 20% of armor, for example, with this spell. Something sisters could only dream of. You could also give 20% armor. So in that sense, I kind of consider it neutral. I think the odds are the same. So if one is the other, then they cancel each other out. Player's been posting it on the forums, his shots with this, and it's fun to see. You know, it does good damage. You can have a lot of fun with it. I think it's a very viable spell. I don't think it's up there. I would say it's great, and then this is still the... I don't ever want to take it. It suffers from that AoE kind of thing, and then if you give buffs, it's horrible. But it's way better than it was, and you can have fun with it, and you can do damage with it. And it is the damage spell for the sorcerer. I just don't think that's quite how you build him. I think he kind of suffers as that build. But I think it's something you can go out there and have fun with. And it can keep your opponent honest as well, which is important. They're going to kind of be honest from the Sorcerer's Curse. They don't want to eat that. So they're going to have to take magic resistance anyway. But the Warp Lightning can be another tool to kind of keep your opponent honest for magic resistance. Honestly, when I face Skaven, I'm much more scared about Sorcerer's Curse than Warp Lightning, to be quite honest. So Paranoia says a third of them are positive and 2/3 are negative. So odds are you could get more negatives overall. So it's better than I'm going to go with my gut reaction. I don't think it is like elite or godly. I think the damage numbers are too low. And one bad buff is just debilitating. It's just enough to leave a horrible taste in your mouth. So I think it's just great. It's a great spell. It just could be stronger. But it kind of can't. It's okay. It really is okay where it is. Because he does other things. So it's okay, honestly, right there. It's fine. That's fine right there. The fact that comets are average, and it's like what the sisters need to function, like that is a distinction from... He doesn't even kind of need Warp Lightning, but God, it's pretty good, you know? Like that is just, it's so frustrating for me as a player that this is the case. Like the guy with other really good debuffs and tools in his kit still has a better like magic attack than the team that literally needs a fucking magic attack to function. It's very frustrating. Because now we get to 2 spells that are really good. I've said on the forums numerous times, I feel like his 4 OP spells are his best spells. So you can kind of guess where they're going. In Shrouding Mist, we talked about it increases range resistance by 20 or 50. I mean, we looked at Divine Revelation. It did a fraction of this and was single target. This is a group of your targets. nearly twice as much range resistance. That's for one more OP. I don't know how else to say that is. And that was one of the sister's best spells, guys. I don't know what to say. You can't resist this. It's really fucking good. We haven't even gotten to the second part. You can now hit targets at 30% more chance. So you have they have the melee resistance. This one overcomes it by 3, with that 10% melee resistance. Now this is, 3 times better chance to overcome that divine revelation thing you put on. It's just so much significantly better. It's insane. I don't know. It's the basics. This is a stepping stone one. You can stack them for 75%, which is pretty fucking huge. And 45% is huge as well. I don't think it's as necessary, though, since those numbers are so high. But it's definitely not below average. You can function with that one. Yes, you have to stay in the cloud. At this point, you're in battle anyway, which is why you're doing it. And you're putting it right there. And if it's still the skirmishing phase, I believe the way the cloud works is it kind of works through the cloud even. You say you have to be in it, but I think if it's behind the cloud, it kind of works. Maybe I'm wrong, though. I don't know. I could be wrong about that. Maybe you do have to directly be in the cloud. But I think it's just a very strong tool when battle started to protect your Skaven from being shot to pieces and then to actually land your attacks. Again, the tools, if you're looking at this, the Skaven can bypass your melee resistance. The sisters can't. They can't. They have nothing to bypass your melee resistance in their spellbook. The Skaven can. They both get maces. The Skaven can bypass your armor. The Skaven can bypass your stances, dodge and parry. They're bypassing a lot of things that the sisters dream of doing. It's just, when you look at it, like, just next to each other like this, it just becomes so apparent something is not like the rest. Then you get to the warp mists, which is just the best cancer you can get. If the doctor diagnoses you with warp mists, you know you're in trouble. I honestly think this is my favorite spell in PvP. And the only reason is I cannot stand people that are passive and dick around and hide and like just passive gameplay. And this is the number one tool for saying fuck you. It's also a nightmare to face. But like once you get used to having warp mists, it's addictive as a tool. So what this does is, since it's, again, you can use a staff, you can get 52 meters range on this. And you toss out a mist cloud, and anyone inside takes damage. What is it, 20 damage? And then mastery, they take 30 something for 3 turns. That is a very uncomfortable feeling. And that also reduces the poison, which is essential for the poison builds of this team. This is the number one way to reduce poison as well. More than any other skills is this spell. So I was facing an opponent that loved playing warlocks. It's always the mercs players. No offense, but it's always you guys. Jesus Christ, it's always you guys. And you have 100 initiative warlocks, and you just delay turn 1. You just delay. And you expect your opponent to just walk out and say hello to your delaying warlock. And I don't want to do that. It's stupid. And no one does want to do that. And it's, your archers are in overwatches and your and then you just take your warp mist priests and you just throw these all over the fucking delaying warlocks, and it's the most satisfying feeling you can have in Mordheim. I promise you, once you do it, it brings such joy to you that you'll want to do it every time. So warp mists, it's a great tool for flushing out these campers. It does damage. It's really it. And if you also want to do poison, it's the best spell for doing poison. So there's a lot of good reasons to take it. Again, you can stack it. So if we really look, I think if you're doing a poison build, I think that brings it up to like really stacking a lot of poison resistance bypass. I don't think it's that much though, because you're talking about 2 units that have to bring it, and you eat through 8 OP, which is a bit brutal. But you do get 65% poison bypass. So you're really going to land your poisons. And so it can be very effective in a PvE warband using these. But yeah, these two spells just for the camping guys that want to shoot you or to hit them and then to flush them out. I think these are just really wonderful tools. Doing actual damage, doing more damage with dots, reducing movement and landing more damage by stance bypass, taking away OP and doing magic damage. I think it's a very well-rounded spellbook at this point. I went on and on about Sorcerer's Curse on the forums only because of how insanely strong the Warlocks is, and I got jealous. But Sorcerer's Curse is in a fine spot. You just get very jealous when you see a 2 OP version. You know, like with 15% more magic resistance bypass is just kind of insane. Yeah, but the miss damage is increased in the mod, which is good. It's important for flushing, and I think the poison bypass was increased. So yeah, the Eshin's a very fun unit. Very fun unit. A lot of tools. I think he's in a perfectly good spot now. After some of the tweaks from earlier patches. So yeah, I know people are like, holy shit, he won't shut up about the sisters right now, but that's because I actively did a deep dive in them. My previous deep dives were mercs, which is where they're very strong. And I don't think much has even changed from them. The tactician rework came out of fucking left field. The lightning was 4 OP and it was horrible. It was like comets are right now. So that got luckily moved back. But then we did the Skaven deep dive. Now after doing the sisters, like what a mess. Yeah, 8 to 16. Yeah. All right, so that takes us to Undead, who I think are also in a very strong place right now, to be fair. I've said this a lot. I think they're very strong. And I don't think I've really played them in a tournament yet. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should just play them and be like, oh my god, they're so weak. But I have had necromancers in my warbands, so it's hard to imagine them not considering them weak. You start with Rotten Touch. Not a very high damage spell, but you start with it for free. This is what the sisters would love to have comets back. Master this at 9? Like, my god. You dream of this. Now, the mastery is almost the same as the basic comet. I mean, it's actually a lot stronger. It's at 21. And that's at like 15. 21. This is at what we decided, 29. But it's 2 OP, right? And you start with it, and then it scales. It's not listed here. Oh, there it does say that with disease carrier. And then the other thing is in this mod, and I've said this, in the vanilla you can only increase magic damage with intelligence. In this mod, you can increase it with the pain rune, the channeling rune, and spellbinding. There's 3 tools to increase damage by 60%. They might add up to something like that. And since these are, I think, untouched from vanilla, that's where then suddenly they're relatively stronger, even though it's still at 2 OP, while the comet was nerfed to 3. So relatively, like I've talked about, you could basically kind of double this number. So you can do about 40 damage with a Mastery Rotten Touch, which is enough to kill targets, which is kind of what you use this for. It's like a snipe shot. And even the basic, you can do like 20 damage, 25. I don't know, like 20 we'll just say. We'll just say 20. And sometimes when you're playing the Necromancer, you literally start with it. You can't not have it. You'll be damaging the target, or it'll be a damaged target from melee or something. You're like, oh, if I just do a Rotten Touch or 2, it's dead. No, there's no buffing damage things in vanilla, I don't think. Maybe there was. I don't know. Yeah, I haven't switched over to him. So, oh, there's Van Hell. So I would say the starting one's just good. Almost, it's almost great because it's free, right? The caveat is you literally start with it. I'm not gonna. This costs nothing, and so since you can use it to just snipe kill somebody, I think it's great. Like if it saves you the OP, or you just got a little left over and you just touch them, literally rotten touch them, and they die. And then plus, if you have a lot of ghouls, this can really get up there, and it can cost 1 OP or even 0 OP. That's pretty fucking good to have. Now, I struggle sometimes to take the mastery. I don't think it's godly because of Lifestealer. And I think you can do the Lifestealer, but if you're going to pure raw damage, you can also do Lifesteal, Rotten Touch, and Spell of Doom. And you literally have the 2, 3, and 4 OP spell options. And I think that's kind of a way you do that too. So I think we can put him at godly because of that build. And then you just, it's like a la carte. How do I want to just rip apart my opponent? Let me do the math. Do I only need to do a 1 rotten touch? A 2 rotten touch. Oh. 3. 3 rotten. You know, it's fucking count. I'm sorry if you don't know Sesame Street. So you just pick what you want to kill your poor victim with. We can look at it. Do I want to hit 2 targets? You know, like how do I rip apart my victim? Do I give a warp overcharge and wait till next turn? So in that sense, I think there's a place to master Rotten Touch, especially with the disease carrier, and considering you can get 0 OP fucking spells out of this man. Which takes us to another insane spell called a Van Hell. This is somehow unchanged from vanilla. The only thing he did of one of the most strongest spells, probably the strongest spell with Armor of Righteousness, was buff it. Somehow, the only thing that happened in the mod was it was buffed to lasting 3 turns. I've died on this mountain numerous times on the forums to no avail. The undead players might just hate my guts. But because duration was increased, 1, and because 2, thralls and vampires can cast this now, it needs to be reassessed. In vanilla, I said zombies were annoying because you were forced to take a necromancer, 2 of them, and constantly recast this 1 to 2 turns to keep them functioning. I didn't like zombies in vanilla. In the mod, a whole team of units can babysit zombies now. It's no problem. The duration is now 2 turns and 3 turns, and nothing has been changed. It's too strong now. So what I've suggested is movement needs to go to 1 meter, armor to 10%, and honestly I could give a shit about the other ones because we don't use it that much on those units. Then on mastery, this could be 3, and this can be 20. Now, you get 45%. Now you only get 30%. That's still a lot of armor. Instead of 6 meters, you get 4 meters. That's still a lot of fucking movement for people keeping track at home. If you're curious how much movement, I think it's still over 8. Because you get Knowledge of Mordheim. 5. You're at 9 meters movement if you stack them still. It's still a lot of movement. So anyway, it hasn't been changed. This might be the first spell that goes up there. Probably not. It's still basic. Like if I had to just take one, I'd take this because it's still going to make your zombies function really well. But holy shit, it needs reassessed. This is what kind of makes the undead. And vampires, zombies. The ease in babysitting them is so much less now. Like this man literally starts with the spell now. You can't not babysit them. I like the changes. Do not get me wrong. It's okay. It's okay. But zoom, 95% armor vampires or zombies should not exist anymore in my opinion. Especially with body reconstruction. You can get these fuckers to insane amounts of HP. I think they literally get 20 toughness. 20. You just put the chest piece on them. You don't have to spend a book. And then we've looked at this before. I'm digressing a bit, but I'm trying to make the point of why it's maybe a little too much right now, which I have been unsuccessful in making. I still think the zombies will be extremely effective. We're talking 390 wounds without even the chest piece or the helmet of constitution. It's like 450 plus by 475 for a henchman to have 90 plus armor. It's mind-blowing to me. Warp Overcharge, another controversial. Applies a debuff that deals, again, since maybe I got your attention finally. You did it with the other most broken spell in the game. This was 10 and 20. You found it in your heart to make it 5 and 10. If you can remember those 7, 8 years ago in vanilla, so long ago, we can find the willpower to fix Van Hell finally. It's not big. You're losing 2 meters of movement and 15% of armor. I don't think that's breaking them. I think it's making them reasonable. Anyway. Warp Overcharge. It cannot stack. It takes a turn to act, but holy shit does it hit. It's best on units that can't pick up a word stone. So demonettes, impressives, demons. And it will do 60 to, boy, that's a spread, 120 damage. This thing is just all over the place with people hating it and liking it, so it's probably in a good spot, to be quite honest. I think it's great, and I think this is elite. I honestly don't think it's godly, because you can remove it with Elixir. In PvP, you can remove these things. Let's get some symmetry here. And you just pick up a stone. The AI does it to me. God, it's fucking annoying. They love to do this, too. So it is annoying. Like, holy shit. They do love that spell in the mod. And I think right out the bat, you can use this pretty effectively. It's hard to stall in PvP. Or PvE, low-level PvE, where you have this. It's hard to like make the turns count because everyone's dead pretty quickly anyway. But stacking these against a demon, you can do, 240 damage? I mean, this is significant stuff. The problem is it's delays and it's not stackable. The things that suck about it suck enough to make it not insane. But I think it is really good, and it should be really good, and I like what it's brought to the mod overall. I don't know what else to say. If you get the low roll, you feel like you didn't do fuck all. So 2 OP is 2 OP. You start to have curse chances. It's usually the thralls and vampires you see spamming this around, and they're usually in heavy armor or have a harder time. Maybe they just wanted to attack instead, So I think it's okay where it's at. It feels a bit like the cult, honestly. Yeah, I think it's okay. I could see narrowing the range a little. Yeah, I don't know. Like this number, I think scares people. I think that's like a scary number for people, right? So if you could do the mental gymnastics of still making it around 60, but less scary to people, you can maybe make this 40 to 70, or even 50 to 70. Keep it right at 60. Make that 90 to 130. Maybe a little less, right? Doubling it is awkward for you. There's not a lot of things doubled. It's usually like 2/3, 3/3, or so. I can see this hitting that lower threshold. See, I want to say at 120, but it is at 120. It's just I'd rather not eat a 160. I want to know I'm like capping at 120. Right? I think 80 to 140 gets you there. What is that, 110? And I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, it's fine. I think it's fine. It's the perfect amount of like annoyance. Which makes it effective, but it's also like the delay. You can only do it like every other turn, right? It's like a pressure. If you're still locked in combat, like that pressure is just building. Corpse flesh increases critical and poison resistance and armor absorption. So this is your armor of righteousness, except instead of all this fear and terror, which they kind of do anyway, you get critical resistance. It honestly feels a bit like a better armor of righteousness in a way. It's hard to like, you stack it. I think the basic's a bit rough, but you kind of do want to stack it. Might be just more on the average. It's not bad. Like 15% is pretty good actually. So I think you would use the basic. It's hard because it's 3 OP, but so is stacking the righteousnesses. It feels awkward to do. But the armor absorption's a big deal. The critical resistance is a big deal, and undead are no longer immune to poison. The poison numbers are so small to not even matter, to be quite honest. What you're looking at is crit and armor. So it makes you tankier, and that's a good thing for the undead. I don't know what else to say. That's like about it. This is part of the problem with the Van Hell, though, is getting those in there with these high numbers. So you get the 45 plus another 10. You're at 55%. Plus he buffed cloth armor absorption, which is 20%. I can't figure out why you wouldn't nerf Cull of Van Hell at this point. You gave cloth 20%. You buffed the base armor of zombies on top of it all. So zombies come out with a shield of iron and cloth. They're at 30% armor right out the bat. And then you can give them another 55 very easily. It just starts to get bonkers with all that HP. I don't know. Poor heart failure. He's got a lot of spells here. Life Stealer. All right, we have Comet, but better. Again, poor Comet. I hate to beat the dead horse, but this horse, it needs its ass beaten into the ground. Because it's the worst 3 OP spell in the game. Again, we're at 29. This is at 28. Is it? Average damage? 1 less average damage, but you heal. Well, who cares about healing? Well, what this healing basically means, every necromancer ever made should take mastery exhaustion, because you can just heal it. So the necromancer, as well as having like warp attunement, which is fucking crazy strong, you can cast more spells while eating less curses, which is a really good thing to have as a caster. You also then get free mastery exhaustion. They look at this, you can't see it, but they get 15 toughness as a baseline. And there's no reason not to get max toughness, which is mastery exhaustion. So on top of that, more casting with a staff from 52 meters away, or 46. You can also then get 2 more SP than your purifier. Well, I mean, look, they can take it. It's actually probably harder for them to get. Yeah, she only has 12 toughness, the purifier. So she has to use a book on top of it. But you can then, like, you have more movement around the map. So that's the point of Life Stealer, is you can just heal up your mastery exhaustions. And then Life Stealer can be basically 2 OP. So in that sense, the damage per OP is significantly higher than any other spell in the game. It's the strongest spell. It's stronger than lightning. I mean, I don't even know what there's to talk about. The basic, it's still, I don't know, it's the basic. It's not going to do anything. Every basic damage dealing spell's down, except the free one you start with, huh? That one's doing okay. It's the only unit to start with a damage dealing spell. And then we've talked about it, and I agree. It's cool with the undead. You have one start with Van Hell, the zombie. You have the thrall start with Wordstone, whatever. Wordstone thingy. Rush? I don't know what it's called. And then the zombie, or the necromancer starts with Rotten Touch. So it's cool that each one has a different starting spell. It makes forced diversity. Spell of Doom. You can cast this from a across the Atlantic Ocean and damage your opponent. The mastery is 20 meters less, but it has a 10-meter fucking radius. So it's 25 meters from the middle. Well, from the edge, it's literally 30, right? Like your max. No, it'd be 5, because I think the spell's targeted on the middle. So in reality, it's 25 meters, because it's from the middle. I think it's a radius, right? No, radius. The diameter would be 20. Holy fuck. So the range is 30 meters. So, because it's a radius, the diameter of the spell is 20 meters. So 20 plus 20 is 40. So you can hit a target, and then you have a staff and reach. You're casting this across the Atlantic Ocean. I don't know why this isn't a 5-meter radius. I don't know. If anyone watched my match against True Griffin, you could see how he just killed my team twice. Both our matches. Till I got my revenge. It can just kill entire swaths of teams. The reduced OP cost. Yes, it's 10 more. So it's 30 meters range. A staff is 36. Reach is 46. And then, or expert cast, you know what I mean. Expert casting's 10, so you're at 40. The staff is 46, and then the reach pendant could be 52. 46 will probably get the job done, though. You're outranging literally everything. So, Idol of Death, I went from a 4 to a 3. Sorry. Living enemies near the totem, so it doesn't affect your own warbands, basically. Don't do it against yourself. All Alone, Fear and Terror is reduced by 15. The moral impact is like whatever. Flee and disengage cost more is a good thing. It does matter. Like if you can rapture your opponents faster, if you get enough in the Idol of Death, then their impact drops faster and they have a route test. So it's not nothing. The big thing with the Idol of Death too is you can block doorways with it. Which in itself is amazing. Like you could literally stop a demon just by putting an idol down. If anyone's watched, again, True Griffin, just against me, he was using idols and totems to block me. Like building a wall with them alone is something. So that's great. The Fear and Terror, I think, is nice. Like, I think it can make a big difference if you really invest in it. I've talked a lot about, and previously in skills, how no one is really using Intimidate. Demoralize. I would love to see a warband undead using Demoralize, and I think this is a good way to like just stop melee resistance kind of builds. I think you saw a lot of effectiveness with this with True Griffin. He used it very well against Tarrant. He used it against me to reduce my Fear and Terror. I was failing them a lot. He was blocking me in with it. I don't think it's godly though, actually. It's probably just elites, and this one's probably okay. Stacking them's a good idea. Having this wall, it's probably actually good. Just building a wall in front of a door into a building is just very effective. It's like a good thing. So as an obstacle, it's like the pyre that you used to have with witch hunters, except you can just keep putting them down. I think it's very strong. It's cheesy as fuck, but you can save units' lives with this idol. For 3 OP, you can save a life. The AI just doesn't know how to get around it. So it's extremely strong in that regard. Again, it's funny with the undead. I didn't want to talk about their traps because I feel like it's the cheesiest shit ever. And the undead have a lot of cheesy shit in their war, which makes them demoralizing to play. Heart Failure reduces max OP and SP by 1, and then duration is 3 turns. I think it needs to be 2. I don't know why it's only 1, and I think that's a big issue with the mastery. Like, the mastery is very much not good enough. Like, it's not good when your basic is better. than the mastery. You're gaining a turn. You get some more range, but I think the mastery needs to be 1 OP, 2 OP, and SP. I get you can put them in the. I get it. You can put them in the Skaven, and maybe that's too much, but I don't think that should be the fear here. I don't think you should consider that when doing that. I think you need to consider it as an undead skill. Or you just need to rework it and get rid of OP SP, really. It needs to be something like the Chains of Chaos or something where you can't use skill attacks, or I don't know. Or it weakens you, reduces damage. It's got to be something different. I just don't think it's working this way. Yeah, I knew you would say that. I knew you would say that. I get it, but I think in this sense you have to say blocked warbands. You can't have I don't think anyone would allow necromancers in any warband anymore, the way they function, in any tournament. I don't know how you could. So I think that needs to not be considered. I think you need to consider them. I get mutants can join and do touch of palsy, but I don't think that should. Don't be in the idol of death. Don't be afraid. Do what feels right. And I think it's 2 OP, 2 SP. And then it can be okay. And then the mastery can actually be better. I honestly think it's really bad. It's just not in a good way. Everything else is fine. Other bands have this shitter spell in it. Everything else is just fine with them, though. I mean, you're seeing this, and this is what the other warbands should look like. I expected a lot of them to look like this. I don't think that's a bad thing. Alright, then you got the Doomweaver. Boon of Ruin, probably the worst starting spell besides Blessing of Athleticism and Sinful Speech. Sinful Speech might be the worst starting spell, considering PvE. Boon of Ruin you can at least put on opponents to make them hurt themselves. Reduces the cost of counterattack. I didn't really know that. That's interesting. I've never really used this. And then increases your hit chance by 10%. I don't think that hit chance is enough. It needs to be like 10 and 20 for you to ever use it on yourself. But the way you're supposed to use this is you put it on your impressive inside of Idol of Blood. That's how it was supposed to be used in vanilla. Kind of doesn't work out anymore. Now you just kind of put it on an enemy and let them hurt themselves. And I guess you don't mind you're getting hit. I feel like these numbers are lower than they were. I feel like these used to be higher. The one thing about Boon of Ruin is you can just spam it out if you're a blow-uppy build. So I don't think it goes up here. But you can do quick casts and trying to blow up inside of Idol of Change. And this is like the spell you do because it's free and it's 2 OP. It's kind of its only use, to be quite honest. I would say it's just bad. I don't think it gets better. The 10% is not enough. The damage is not that great. You're making it easier for them to... I don't think anyone would ever master this, really. I think it is, too. I do think these are the old numbers. I feel like these numbers are twice this much. And I think the hit chance is higher. I agree. I think so, too. So those higher numbers are better. I remember it being the highest self-damaging thing. So putting that on like an opponent can be pretty dangerous. But a lot of times you're using it in an Idol of Change, so it doesn't actually stack. We could put it there. I don't know. If you're kind of the blowy uppy type, then you don't, it's tough to use that inside of Idol of Change. The target would have to be outside of it. And then you'd have to hope it doesn't come into the Idol of Change. Yeah, I think it is. I don't know if the hit chance is higher or not. Warp Accretion I've talked about really wanting to like, but I don't think this works either. So, increases Wordstone resistance I know does work. Gathering a Wordstone does increase the critical resistance. I just pretty much 100% positive it wasn't stackable. Um, but it's still critical resistance, and I still think it's fine. It's one of these spells you have nothing to do on turn 1, and it can easily replace Boon of Ruin as my 2 OP spell I want to spam out. Because the Doomweaver's funny. He quickly runs out of 2 OP spells. If you've noticed that every other one, there's a multitude of 2 OP spells, except for the Doomweaver. Which is probably why they have the Idol of Change for him. But he quickly goes into all those idols, which are 3. You could argue if some idols should be 2 OP versus 3 OP. I don't know. But Warp Accretion I still think is fine. Like 40% Wordstone resistance is pretty healthy. That's nice. It's tough to master it though, but 20% crit resistance, we just talked about like Corpse Flesh. Like that's not bad. The thing is you have to go out of your way to get it again. Is this it? This punch? I honestly think it's kind of good. And that one might be average. For if you have just 2 spell points sitting there, which a lot of times you do, in this case you won't because you're probably not mastering Boon of Ruin. And you probably just take a basic idol to be fair. But I think taking just kind of the basic there's like worse things to do for sure. I mean that crit resist matters. Like if you take this on an early Doomweaver, because you can get it at 3 and 9, and you start just because it's hard to use him early on. It really is as he's growing up in the Warband. He's kind of dead weight, but you can at least throw this around your units and have them not be getting crit everywhere and eating all the Wordstone debuffs. And I think that's something to be said for that. I do think there's something to be said for that. If it truly stacks, then damn, you got something. You'll never be crit again. Which is nice. I talked about this guy too. He wants Warp Accretion in conjunction with, I don't know, Suffering? No, what's the one that makes your crit higher? I don't think that was the range resistance one. Scorn, I guess. It reduces his critical resistance. So what the designers were trying to do is he puts Warp Accretion on self, goes and picks up a stone, gains 20% crit resistance, does his funky chicken dance, gives his team 10% critical chance, but doesn't eat the 20% less critical resistance. This is what he's supposed to be doing. So your Doomweaver casts that on himself, picks up a stone, and dances for his team. Just so you can see what I'm talking about with the synergies. You don't see it used often, but that's how it's supposed to work. Idol of Blood is the most broken thing in the game that is not breaking armor. The only reason the basic is not up there is because the other one's better. But it's still, the second you, like the first thing you do on your Doomweaver, the first thing, I was talking about Warp Accretion, but honestly, the first thing you do is train Idol of Blood. And you save all of your units' lives. Everything else is irrelevant. I don't care what the rest says. If you hit a target, you gain 32 wounds. There's something about you can't get away from it, whatever. Are immune to all alone, great. Everyone's stuck in combat. You position it lasts 2 turns, and you position it so where only your units can get the buff. My favorite is when the AI puts it down and just heals my entire team. It's like, oh, you shouldn't have. I was a little wounded. Like the AI actively heals you with it. And then, of course, 64 is better than 32. 32 is sometimes just plenty to heal your unit, especially like your Impressive, who's taking the brunt of hits. It can attack 5 times. It's just insane the amount of healing you can get out of this, especially when you consider that the chaotic advantage, yeah, just feeds you back even more OP. This is in God tier when we did the cult stuff. Everyone should have chaotic advantage because then you get back counterattacks to continue getting Idol of Blood. It's just absolutely bonkers. Idol of Change is also insanely broken. Um, it's going to be exactly the same. Is that it? That must be it. It's by far one of the strongest spells in the game. It's a combination of many things that are very strong into one 3 OP spell. So everyone near the totem is purged of magic effects. Well, where have we seen this? It was called Dispel, and that was on the Warlock. Now the range is limited. You only have 5 meters range. I think you can take the stuff that increases casting range to increase it. So a staff and reach and stuff would make it actually have better range. But you can dispel every effect, magic effect. That's very good. That's called Dispel. Okay, so we have Dispel. The second part, you gain 25 or 50% magic resistance. The Warrior Priest had this. It was 15 and 20 for an AoE. 15 and 20. This is 25 and 50. The Talisman does 40, for fuck's sake, and it's overpowered. This does more than a Talisman. Okay. All right, so it's Dispel plus magic resistance, whatever the Warrior Priest spell was called. What else does it do? Well, it also reduces the spell casting cost for arcane spells. Oh, okay. So I can spam out more spells? I can just, have a Warlock, pick up an idol, and have 0 OP cost Rotten Touches? I can have 1 OP Life Stealers? Oh, what else does it do? Tell me more. Well, if you happen to be fighting this Soulfire Priest that's committing suicide, or if for some reason you're afraid of Sister's Comets, you can put this idol down, and then it increases their spell casting cost for their divine spells. Oh. Okay. Well, they'd be fucking stupid to cast because you have 50% magic resistance anyway. But it also shuts down their casting. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Idol of Pestilence. I don't know what else to say. I've said it all. Right? I don't know what else to say. I can say how it should be fixed, I guess. You could change a multitude of those things and then have it fixed. I can't remember the suggestions made, but you could probably start with not having 25 to 50% magic resistance, because that's kind of insane. The OP thing, that's cute. I like that. There's no reason to get rid of that. I think that's kind of essential to it. But you could have increased curse chance, which I think was another suggestion, which fits the Doomweaver, who has... Where is it? It's somewhere here. Favored. He wants to get curses. This is his fucking spell. Let him get more curses. And then the Necromancer can't take as much advantage of it. So I think that's a good change. It helps him blow up faster. That's what he wants to do. You can get rid of the Purging effect. I think you can keep the Purging effect. So if you keep the Purging effect, cool. Make this maybe not insanely powerful magic resistance, like the strongest in the game. Maybe not do that. Not have an AoE Talisman plus. Like, you could probably get rid of that. You can keep the offense point thing, but then have it more curses because it's riskier. You're fucking with Tzeentch. How about it's a little more risky, So I think and if you do those changes, you still have Dispel, you still have the Warrior Priest spell, and you still you can reduce. It's still 3 really good spells into one. Okay, I think you can bring it down from insanity levels. Anyway. Idol of Pestilence. This poor fucker after those first two. And it's funny because I actually really like this one. It's Wither, kind of, or Boon of Curse of Chaos, except like every stat. And I really like this. I mean, it's cool because it's like the Idol of Death. And I wish it would get more use. You can block doorways with it. But then you reduce all of the primary stats. When you add that up, it is a lot. You lose 15% dodge for basic. You lose, was it 9% damage, 3% easier to crit, 15% less dodge, 6 less initiative, 3% less magic resistance, 15% less parry. Like, these all add up into one thing. Like, that's really good. Like, if you want to move it down to 2 OP, that's fine. That's fine. I still think it's a really good... This should be more of your goal of what idols should be for this guy. After having the first two fucking insane ones, this is more in the wheelhouse. Like, if you stack 2 of these, 7 primary points is half of your stats, basically. It's really good. And, again, True Griffin used this, and I think quite effectively against the Skaven. And I've used it, and I've always been happy with how it works out. If I'm playing... We've talked about Sorcerer's Curse and other things. If you put down a 4, reduce your agility by 4, that's 20% less dodge. That's like the Sorcerer's Curse kind of... It's better than the Blessing of Athleticism, which I can just keep hammering how awful it is. Like, you're bypassing more... Just with one stat, you're bypassing more dodge than fucking Blessing of Athleticism. And that's one of the 9 attributes. You're gaining 4% crit chance. Like, all the things you're doing with this are significant. So I actually think it's a really good little idol. The problem is it has to compete with everything else. So it probably brings it down a notch. I think the 3 versus the 4 is just fine. I think they last the same amount of time. You're literally talking about 1 difference. It can't be up here because those are up there. And it's not godly. You could probably almost say it's down here, sadly. I think it is really good. These 2 needed another tier, probably, is the biggest problem. It's not even fair where they are compared to the rest. They're so broken. It's called Spiteful Manifestation. I couldn't remember the name of it. And then you have the other idol that's actually kind of decent and should be what you should strive for with the other 2. It was pretty strong, I guess, for a little bit there. But enemies near the totem gain a stackable debuff that increases morale impact by 1 and decreases stun and critical resistance by 3%. The idol must be placed. And then stun and critical resistance increases to 6%. I talked about the Wolf Priest, how I hated Northern Tenacity. I kind of forgot this existed. This is a great example why. I think it's Northern Tenacity. I don't know. The one that, or Crush the Weak. Is it Crush the Weak? Crush the Weak. Now we're talking. Every time you hit something, you strip its stun resist or crit resistance by 6. You could see, now you can only put 1 idol down a turn. But you could see like 2 turning these. Idol of Lust, Pestilence. You're going to be stripping away a lot of crit resistance. And there's going to be a lot of area particle effects as well. But this is like a legit real spell. Like, this is way better than Sigmar's Might. This is just a really good spell to help you get crits. If you want to make a crit cult warband, just I was talking about with the Wolf Priest, the Howl, and the Blessing, it's fine. It's very viable. I find it to be a bit tedious, but there's no reason you can't do Blood Offerings, Pestilence, Idol of Lust, Boon of Chaos, up that accuracy, right? You could see where these all synergize, and you could just crit the fuck out of everybody. We just talked about Ritual Defiance or whatever, Scorn. You could perfectly easily crit the hell out of everybody with the cult. Better than the sisters, promise you that. And this is one of the tools that does it. Stackable. And it reduces morale impact. I mean, I honestly think it's got... If you want to crit, you can do it. It's fine. I think the basic's not that good. I think it maybe needs to be 4%. It's like that weird break defenses. The math isn't working. Just like it wasn't for break defense. Well, does it not break defenses? Sharpshooter with the crit building. Like, the ratio's a little... Like, why is it half as much? I feel like it should be like 4%. That 1% makes a little bit of a difference. I guess the morale impact stays at 1. But this is something you go all in for, so you take it. And if you want to crit people, yeah, that quickly adds up. So, and someone used it when it was higher numbers, and it definitely was effective for them. You just, it's so sad how few fun builds we've seen in these tournaments. Is what this reminds me. You know? Oh, there could be so much fun. We had one cult player. You know? I think we had like one Doomweaver. Maybe two. He was just supporting necromancers. All right. But these are pretty good. Like, these are reasonable totems. The other two, they're gone now, as they should be. Holy shit. By the way, for Idol of Blood, I think you cut it in half. If I haven't said. You just cut the effect in half. I think it's fine. And please fix its fucking HP. I don't know if you can find that in the coding, but it has 412 HP. You can't destroy the Isle of Blood. There's a number between 1 and 512 HP you could probably put the Idol of Blood at. It doesn't have to be easy to destroy, but holy shit, let me destroy it if I want to. 100, 150 HP, okay, something. But this could be 16 and this could be 32. Perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. It would work great. I think it's in a... If you look at vanilla, it's way better than vanilla. So, and then we talked about the other one. Spiteful Manifestation. I think I finally saw someone using this. The biggest problem with Spiteful Manifestation, again, it's an AoE. That's one of its biggest thing. It's 4 OP. Is this doesn't stack. It only takes armor absorption once. I feel like this should stack and it'd be a hell of a lot better. But maybe it breaks other warbands if you have a stacking. The thing is, it's 4 OP again. It's tough to get off. But if you're the Magister, you take Acid Breath 10 times out of 10 instead of Spiteful Manifestation. So the damage I don't think is enough to make the armor absorption matter. Out of all the things you can take, I think there's just better options. Any AoE spell that's just no good. And it's probably right there. It might even be a little better than the Fireball. Because it's still an AoE. I'd have to look at the numbers again. Which is frustrating to do. This was at 21, isn't it? Average damage. Let's look at the gold standard. Well, we can look at the Necromancer really fast. Oh, it's better than that. So that's 19. It's at 21. I'm always coming back to this guy because he is the gold standard. $28, is it? Yeah, that's 7 more. That's significantly more. So you might want to look at that. But then you would say, well, you're stripping armor. So it could probably go up a few points on average. Yeah, I think if you make it stackable, it's definitely, we're on to something. Getting 3 of them out could be dangerous in an Idol of Blood or Idol of Change. So maybe that could be 5%. I don't know. It's hard to say. I think it could, there's room for tweaking there. Either the average damage or stripping, stacking. And then Burning Blood, which I think is technically the strongest single target spell in the game. Technically. That's 35. That's 24. That's a big difference. 11. But this debuff is static. That is locked in at 34 or 32 average damage. You just get 32 damage. The key is if the debuff goes. And then the fact that he can up his with, what is it? Daub of Hatred or something? Yeah, so he has this, and the lightning, the Warlock does not. So he can gain 30% that the Warlock can't on this initial, which helps bring him a little closer. Well, we can do the math on it. It's 24, so that's, you know, it's 2.5, we'll say. It's 7.5 more average damage. And that already brings him up there, right? Because this was about 7.5 higher. That was 35. This is 24. So it was 11. So he's still like 4 off. But if you just take that Daub of Hatred, your initial Burning Blood's only doing 4 average less damage than the Lightning. That's, wow. But okay, it's 4 OP though, right? So it starts to become very awkward. But when you're using this Burning Blood, you're 100% standing in an Idol of Change. So you have to kind of ramp it up. But he loves to curse himself. He's the opposite of the Necromancer with his favored. So where do I feel Burning Blood's at? Thanks, man. My nasally voice. I still think it's great. I don't know. It's hard to put it up there because of that debuff. You can remove it. You just walk in the Idol of Change. It's awkward as hell. And then he likes to blow up all the time. I've made specifically Daub of Hatred, damage dealing Doomweavers, and they just fuck me over all the time. They never get all their damage out. When they do, it's significant. And I don't even know. We'll keep a theme here and just keep it at awful. That might be a little mean. It might be just really bad. Because you do get that dot. It's still probably awful, though. Okay, so there's a plan to tweak Burning Blood a little somehow. Where are we at here? He's a bit more skewed down, which I think is fair. I mean, he's all about the idols, right? This is what he does. The Spiteful Manifestation and Burning Blood feel like they're just like tacked on. It's just not quite the damage you want, even with that Daub of Hatred. And I think it's counter to the builds you want to make for him. He loves fucking killing himself. So I think the best version of him is a melee resistance. Go blow everyone up, Doomweaver. And if you're making that build, it's awkward to take these skills because you're probably standing in the Idol of Change. So the debuff won't stack because you're in the Idol of Change. You can't apply the magic effect. The armor ripping won't apply, right? Like these things won't apply. So they're like self-defeating. I would guess these wouldn't even apply. So a lot of his stuff he does with his debuffs won't apply if you're in an Idol of Change with him. So his biggest thing is to kind of just throw down one of these better idols. I would prefer Pestilence or Lust versus this broken shit. Of course, that's still good. But you can only do one a turn. And then just like throw out the 2 OP shit. Which is going to probably have to be Boon of Ruin until your opponents explode. But that's kind of how he works best as a unit. If you try to make him a ranged damage dealer, I think it kind of struggles a lot. You're relying on a shitty AoE or the awkward-ass Burning Blood. And then it comes back to, what do I do the turns I'm not fucking doing anything? I'm just standing around. Engagement hasn't started. And that's where you have to kind of use Warp Accretion. Despite how awkward that is. So I guess he's kind of the weaker of the destruction users. But he also has 2 of the most broken spells in the game. Yeah, I don't know. Like we talked about the armor bypass ones, but those are certainly there. This combines 3 to 4 spells into one. This is by far the best heal in the game. By far. I can't even count how many battles this has changed or lives it's saved. Necromancer's just fine. Like everyone else is kind of living up here as they should. This is a clean look for the Eshin. And then you only get 1 Magister, so his spells really had to matter. And I think they do. Is everything in the middle? I feel like that one's needs to go like that. Stupid advertisements everywhere. You want a quick sneak peek? Bastion did well, Mork. He did quite well. So did the Necromancer. No one should be surprised. Oh, it's fun. It's fun looking at them. You can watch the VOD. I publish it. I published the last one. It doesn't like to auto-publish anymore. And I've moved the first one to YouTube, and I'll move this one to YouTube for posterity's sake. You guys can all, again, get on the discussion forum and tell me, holy shit, the recency bias on Sisters. But now that we've done hours of this, I don't know. You guys can come to your own conclusions. I think one warband in their spellbook sticks out from the rest significantly in not a good way. Once you finally really truly look at them all and how they function as a team and what they're doing. So maybe last, we'll do literally the units themselves, I think. The icons of the units and how you can build them and how they function and why they're good or bad. I'll probably have to open the screen. I mean, I know I will. And you guys will be able to see the stats like this because I won't have nearly as many. And we can talk about like, yeah, this is why it's bad. Well, each warband will probably take a while. Like, look at these awful stats. Lad's Got Talent versus regular henchmen. There's actually a lot of units when you think about it. And, oh, look at these weapons they have and how dog shit they are, and this is why this isn't working. And we've talked about these spells previously and these skills and how these work and don't work together to create like a final painting of where I feel I guess the mod is at this point, the strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, I think you could literally then just say, I kind of did already, where I feel the warbands are leveling out. When you look at the warband unique skills, how the units can be built, I just think witch hunters and sisters it's tough for them right now. Honestly, the witch hunters had some recent buffs, which has helped. It's helped, but I don't know. I don't know about the sisters. I don't think they've done anything in the mod that didn't revolve around a cheerleader maiden. Anyway, this is exhausting. Thanks for watching. I might bring up my sister's warband and we can actually look at the skills and talk about why I'm so stupid and where I was going with things. I thought about doing that. Kind of want to finish them. Take everything to 555, even though I'm so over them. Maybe we can come back in a minute and do that.